Safer Sanctuaries, Nurturing Trust Within Faith Communities is a new and comprehensive resource that continues the tradition of Safe Sanctuaries ministry by building on its trusted policies and procedures. To learn more, go to safersanctuaries.org or call 800 972 0433.
Hello and welcome to the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast. Today we're exploring a topic that is transforming the way ministries engage with their congregations: artificial intelligence. That's right, AI is no longer just for tech companies and futuristic movies. It's a tool that can help churches connect with their members, analyze data, and make informed decisions. So whether you're a pastor looking to enhance your outreach efforts or a church leader interested in leveraging technology to support your ministry, this episode is for you. Stay tuned to learn more about the exciting ways AI is shaping the future of church marketing. Thank you to everybody for listening. My name is Dan Wunderlich. I'm a United Methodist pastor. And to help us navigate this new and constantly evolving world of AI integration into everyday work is our first ever three-time guest, Kenny Jahng. Kenny, welcome back to the show.
Woohoo! So glad to be here.
Awesome. Only 2 more appearances, and then we send you a fancy coat or something like that, I think. Well, speaking of constantly evolving, Kenny, I feel like you're one of those amazing people who has a core focus and a core mission, which I see as helping churches and nonprofits reach more people through effective communication and marketing. But you are so nimble and entrepreneurial at heart that you're always working on a new project. You've done extensive work with the UMC through United Methodist Communications. You have your own agency. You're the owner and editor-in-chief of churchtechtoday.com, and you are constantly dispensing killer advice on your social channels. And most recently, you have launched a new Facebook community centered around AI in ministry. So question number 1, when do you sleep? And then number 2, if someone on a plane asks you what you do, how do you answer that?
Oh, that's great. You know, what's funny is that at the beginning of this year, I realized that I need to triple my content production and output. So it's a little bit ironic there. So yeah, I would say the best way to explain what I do is I'm a kingdom entrepreneur. I'm constantly just finding opportunities to help solve problems and make connections. And I guess it's just one of those things I feel I have permission in this space to really collaborate with a lot of people and find the pioneers and the innovators, the people that are forward-leaning, growth-oriented like you, right? That's how we're connected.
Yeah.
And to really just, as I get older, it's just, how do you find excuses to work with people that are like-minded and that you like, right?
Yeah.
That's basically the golden rule there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the things I think I most appreciate about you is that it is easy to call yourself an expert on the internet. And it is easy to, especially as we'll talk about today, it's even easier with AI to have slick graphics and a good looking website and effective copy. But I know that you aren't just calling yourself an expert, but that you have done the work and you've done it for a long time. So thank you first for taking your talents and investing them in the church. But then secondly, of course, thanks for investing in our audience here on the show.
Absolutely. Love to be here.
Now, before we jump into AI for ministry, I want to ask a question that I know I've wondered about, and so I'm sure some of our listeners might be wondering about too. In the last year, we did an episode here on this podcast all about the metaverse, and that interview was amazing. That guest was amazing. He's a great friend of mine, and the ministry that he was doing, his team was leading, was making a very real impact in very real people's lives. But since then, the platform where they met has shut down. I think I read that Facebook's parent company, Meta, has pulled the plug on all development in that area, at least for now. What would you say to those who are wondering if AI is just the next fad or something that has a lot of potential, but maybe is ahead of its time and unable to find a viable market? I guess what I'm asking is, you clearly believe AI is here to stay. So what makes this different?
That's a very good question. It is a common question. I think the soundbite I usually have at this point is saying that, hey, AI is not VR.
Yeah.
It's not Bitcoin or NFTs, right? And so it definitely is a rapidly evolving field, and it's natural to have these concerns about like the longevity or the potential. Is this a passing fad? But I think there's a couple of core reasons that make AI different from these other hyped up tech innovations that we've seen come and go, or that haven't hit the tilt,
Yeah.
the massive tilt to the mass applicability.
Yeah.
But one is that it's the actual economic investment that this has seen is huge, and we're talking billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
Second one is that it's just very accessible. This is different than VR, where you need a goggle that's very expensive and
Yeah.
it's not popularized, or Bitcoin and NFT. You still need to be a little bit nerdy to even understand what the heck it is, and
Yeah.
then have monetary assets to invest and do things like that. And so the fact that this is so accessible to everything, where and that's the magic, right? We'll talk about it, I guess. Algorithms and methodologies and tools and all the machine learning, all that kind of stuff used to be, you need to be a coder or a scientist or someone who actually is a specialist in this area. Now, if you speak, it's not even English, Dan, because ChatGPT
Yeah.
speaks multiple languages.
Yeah.
If you know how to talk and have a productive conversation, you could use it. And so I think that's why this is a little bit different.
Well, and it's like working with the most patient coworker. You can ask them a million questions and they're not going to get frustrated with you. And I like this, certainly, yes, the bar of applicability, and you don't need extra technology. You just need a web browser. And I think I just saw, we're recording this in late April of 2023. I saw someone demoed basically plugging ChatGPT into one of the NPC characters of a video game, and gave them a little bit parameters of here's who you are and your background and things like that. So in the future, you could be playing video games and interacting in real time with a side character. So rather than it just being a pre-scripted, 3-line conversation, you could go as far as you want. And these developers can basically make games open-ended.
Well, actually, you've seen probably on social media the viral videos of the deep fake Tom Cruise. Have you seen those series?
Yes.
And that's pretty good, right? And so imagine if that technology does become popularized and accessible, and it's starting to, right? I know voice cloning, like we actually may not be here recording this, Dan. It's just you and I. It could be literally text to speech after using each of our voices to be training the AI. I'm actually working with my team. The deadline is that by the end of the summer, I want to launch a short form podcast, 1 season, 10 episodes, where I literally don't show up for the mic. And we're training the AI right now with my voice to see how to make it dynamic and fluent, and really capture the nuances of my personality in the voice.
Yeah, well, certainly a name that and I'm sure a lot of our audience knows just because I mention him all the time. Seth Godin has his own podcast, and earlier this year, he did an episode where he introed it as, this whole episode, I provided the prompts and all of the answers were written by ChatGPT. And then at the end, he revealed that the voice the whole time was AI as well.
Yes.
And I noticed that something was off, like the delivery was a little flat compared to his normal delivery. And so I thought maybe he's reading rather than read. Like I butchered the intro to this podcast, and I'll reveal later why, but maybe he was reading, someone else's words rather than his own, or reading rather than speaking extemporaneously. And then it like clicked at the end. I was like, oh, because that's AI.
Hey, I mean, if you put a music track underneath the voice, and then if it's a video, you have multiple jump cuts with the video just constantly changing. It's going to be hard to tell in 2023. Imagine what it's going to be like in 2024, 25, and beyond.
Yeah. Well, we are in a little bit getting ahead of ourselves, but this actually sets us up well for the next thing I want to ask. And that is, in many ways, to simply talk about AI as a whole category is like asking about social media in general rather than individual platforms or restaurants as a singular topic. Artificial intelligence is a really broad umbrella, and it is a technology that we have all been interacting with for much longer and in more ways than we probably realize. And so, can you maybe give us a primer on how AI is already a part of our lives, and then clue us into this particular wave of these things that seem new or feel new, mainly the language, image, audio, video generation tools, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see AI and it feels like it's not really AI because it's so primitive, but Siri and Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, right? That's all using AI. GPS is AI, right? Search engines when there's autocomplete, and even just the algorithms of social media, that's all AI. Shopping recommendation engines, your Netflix queue,
Yeah.
all those things are AI all around us. And I think the difference is that that has all been behind the scenes, not really interactive with us. And now this new era of generative AI is what we call it. So Gen AI or generative AI is basically using that stuff not to analyze and find solutions or predict or find patterns, etc., but it uses AI to actually generate new things. Again, images, audio, video, music, and so that has been, I think, the big shift. And again, the generative AI is magical, right? Since
Yeah.
November, the poster child for generative AI is ChatGPT. You probably have heard of ChatGPT by now. And the reason why it's magical is because it's taken machine learning AI and put on top of it natural language processing AI, which allows you to talk to it as if you're talking to another conversation partner. You don't need to be a coder or scientist or anything. And then it does its thing, its brainiac AI thing, and then comes back and it does the translation into natural human language.
Yeah.
So that that thing has been a game changer, and that's what we're talking about in this period of this chapter of life right now. This generative AI is something that everyone is discovering, trying to figure out how we can actually use it for our flourishing.
Absolutely. And one of the great things is that, at least right now in late spring 2023, a lot of these tools, or not a lot, but some of them, like ChatGPT, are free, or are being integrated into tools that some of us might already be using. If you have an Adobe, subscription for their design suite, you have access to some AI tools that were not there earlier. And you don't even really need to be yet an excellent prompt writer to get workable results. It helps to get better at prompt writing. But so, for example, I certainly, our producer has edited it out, but I butchered the intro to today's podcast because I didn't write it. They weren't my words. I asked ChatGPT to write a 30-second intro to today's podcast just based off of the topic. And that was the first thing it spit out. So I didn't even ask for iterations. I didn't work to shape it. I didn't give it feedback. I just wanted to give you all listeners sort of a little mini surprise, but then also just an example of that was first draft, first try of a very basic premise. So you can jump in and start using things already. And so, was it the best podcast intro we've ever had? Probably not. But if you are still listening, it didn't make you turn it off. So, Kenny, how do you recommend that people start experimenting with these tools?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to pick one up and try. I would say the best advice is not to try it once and commit to like a 5-day challenge or a 10-day challenge for yourself to use it 5 days in a row and really try to see what are the things that you do on a daily basis that you might just try to introduce AI into, whether it be writing emails or composing some type of content piece, whether it be social media or devotionals or promotional materials. The first place is just to start using a tool for a couple days in a row, and then your imagination, I guarantee you, will start to run wild, and you'll start to understand that this can unlock a whole new world for you.
Absolutely. And, you know, some of our folks may be slow to want to try it themselves. They maybe don't want to sign up for something, but they wouldn't mind seeing how other people are using it. And I think that's where your new Facebook group could be an excellent tool for people
Absolutely.
to sort of get their toes into the water. And so, Kenny, can you tell us a little bit about this new Facebook group that you've started and how our folks can find it and get connected?
Absolutely. So you can go to Facebook and search for it, or you can go to the website URL AI4churchleaders.com. AI4churchleaders.com, and it'll get you to that page where the Facebook group is. And we're on our way to 1,500 members. It's a hyperactive group. Tons of people are just jumping in and sharing what we're doing. There's tools of the week that we actually highlight in there. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff. Next week we're releasing a primer, an ebook to ChatGPT. June 1st, we're going to have like a showcase event, like a mini boot camp
Yeah.
online, really walking through like over the shoulder. And this is what the benefit of a peer-to-peer community is. You basically get access to like looking over the shoulder, seeing someone else create things for their church. And that is something that you can either basically swipe and try to use it for your own church, or get inspired and start to understand, wow, there's more ways to use this AI thing than I thought.
Absolutely. And the folks there have been really generous about sharing their prompts, which is oftentimes the secret sauce, you know, is how detailed to get. And people are saying, here's what I put in, here's what I got, here's how I shaped it into what I wanted. One of the folks in the group like created a whole new children's book
Yeah.
and had a character created, had a story written, and then used a separate tool to generate the art for it, and was able to basically create a children's book from start to finish. And you know, we may not be making books, but you can use that same technology to create children's curriculum and things like that. And so this will be out in May of 2023. And so if you are listening to this in real time, I hope you heard Kenny say that they've got something coming up June 1st, right at the beginning of June.
Yes.
So when you listen to this, go to that website, AI4churchleaders.com, or search for it on Facebook. Get yourself connected so you can be sure to catch everything that's coming up this summer. Well, I did sign up for ChatGPT earlier this year, and what I have found it to be most helpful for is serving as a brainstorming partner. I am certainly one of those people that can be paralyzed by the blank page, and so while I don't want ChatGPT writing my sermon or producing original work for me necessarily, I really appreciate having a starting point. Having some things on the page to work with. And so, for example, I had a dialogue with it around the core themes of my Easter sermon, and it offered me some ways of framing or some language ideas that I probably either would not have come up with myself or would have taken me forever to get there. So I was able to take some of that output as a starting point and shape it into something that did sound like my voice. And then I asked it to write a 60-second video script that incorporated the themes of my Easter sermon and end with an invitation to the services. And again, I did a little bit of cleanup on the back end, but when I had tried to write it myself, it was like twice as long as it should be. Or when I got it within the time limit, it said nothing because I had edited it down to nothing. But it seemed to really be able to isolate the most impactful idea and express it in a way that made the video invite itself useful and helpful, even if someone had no interest at all in coming to the worship service. And so for you and your work or the ministries that you've worked with, what are some use cases like that or other ones that have been positive and fruitful for folks so far?
Absolutely. So I'll just camp out on that example that you had. Like if it's sermon writing, it could be any writing, right? So it's sermon
Right.
writing, email newsletter writing, devotional writing, text messages. So a great way is not just to start with AI, but also toward the end to come back to AI. You could take what you've written, say a passage or a big chunk or the whole thing, feed it to the AI, and then ask, what would be the questions or the holes or the things that are not logical to someone that is not a believer of Jesus Christ
Mm.
and might be a skeptic? Or how might I strengthen the arguments, the things that I'm trying to convey in this sermon or this piece of content, to be framed well and received well for a youth audience, right? So you literally could actually use it to help you improve your content and see it from different points of view. And then, if it comes up with some objections, you can actually ask it, what's the best way to overcome them? How would I, based on what I've written and what I've argued in the text, what would be the best way to support that query, that objection, engage them in a way that's fruitful? So there's this conversation partner aspect of it that I think is super helpful. And even just the very basics, Dan, like, hey, can you improve the grammar and structure, or make this much more conversational or much more formal, or don't, make it so that it's at the reading level of a fifth grader versus a PhD. There's tons of ways that you can ask it. Hey, a lot of times sermons get to be very long and wordy, Dan, right? And so you can ask, hey, I want to reduce this by 20% or 15%. What would be the best and most efficient way without losing these three main points, right? And so there's so many different ways to use it just from that content creation aspect, where it's not just brainstorming and it's a conversation partner. It's a writing coach, an editor, copy editor. It's someone that literally can be sitting down next to you, with you as you write.
That's so true. In fact, I used it during Holy Week. We do prayer stations on Holy Thursday, and there's a meditation that goes with each one. And I can be pretty verbose sometimes, and I like to write with nuance. But maybe if you're just trying to invite people into an experiential, prayer practice, maybe that's not the best approach. And so I took what I had written the last year, and first I asked it, what reading level is this? And if it was super high, I asked it to make a pass that brought it down, or to copy edit it, or to streamline it. Like, we try to keep it on the front and back of 2 pages, and the font was really small. So I said, reduce it in size so I can get the font size up. And it did all of those things. And, some of the changes I vetoed, but you do that with your own real life editor too, and so, it can be such a helpful brainstorming tool, and a conversational partner. And I heard it said, we just, previous to this episode with you, Kenny, we had a 2-parter with Brady Shearer, and he talked about that this idea that it can do things like write your SEO copy for your website. He's like, I hate doing that. And some of us might not even know what that means, but ChatGPT knows what it means. And so you can ask it to do things, or to teach you how to do things you don't like doing, and it can help take some of those things off your plate.
Absolutely. One of the best tips that I can give people who are starting out is to think of this thing not as a one button candy vending machine where you press one button. There's only one button on the machine, it pops out something, and you have to consume it as is. The better way to think of this, I think, is if you had a fresh out of seminary intern student, a seminary student intern, and you were using them in your workflows, how would you use that? And so you would basically assign them some work. They would go off and do it, come back. And again, you would never take something a first-time intern wrote for you, and then publish it as is, right? You would always, you need to be in the loop, right? You got to review it. There's just not that confidence. And so what would you do afterwards? You don't throw everything out. It's not binary where it's either good or bad. You would redirect the intern and give them pointers and more guidance. The more specificity that you have, the better the quality of the things that you get back. And so managing an intern is what you're doing with ChatGPT. The only difference is they've got a good attitude, no matter how many times you tell them they're wrong. And so, I think that has been very helpful for a lot of people that we've been coaching.
Absolutely. And we'll get into prompt writing in a minute, but that specificity is important. And you can say, you are a United Methodist chatbot, or for a United Methodist audience. And it might not get United Methodist theology 100% right. But if you give it those bounds, you're going to less likely get something that's 100% Baptist. Just to give an example. So maybe on the flip side of things, that we can stick with the language generating AI at the moment. But what are some limitations that you have found so far? Maybe it's just you're gonna need to do dialogue and feedback and shape the output. But maybe too, are there some tasks that AI may eventually be good at, but just isn't quite there yet?
Yeah, I think in general, there's three buckets I would say AI is good for. It's research, like you said, brainstorming, analysis, and content creation. So content creation, I think, is the most intuitive one, and everyone's using that, right? Right, starting with write my sermon for me, and then you
Yeah.
just rip it apart to see if it's good or bad. Um, and the research is the brainstorming, and I think that's something that is evolving. The analysis part, I think, is something that will be evolving. Just like we have search engines, we will start to see what I think is called action engines. That you're going to start to see workflows, multiple steps that the AI is going to execute for you. So, for example, Instacart has said that they're integrating AI into the thing. You're going to be able to say, "Hey, I'm in the mood for some Italian, and in my refrigerator, I got 2 tomatoes. I've got a box of rotini, and I don't know, one zucchini. And then what can I make with it in less than 20 minutes?" And so it will come up with a recipe and say, "Hey, I put all the ingredients that I need into my shopping cart on Instacart,"
Yeah.
and then you can order the groceries, right? So those are the types of things where it will actually figure stuff out for you and then put stuff into your cart and then order it, right? ChatGPT has already announced plugins. So there's a travel plugin, there's a restaurant reservations plugin. So if I'm going to Michigan, Grand Rapids or something like that, and say, "Hey, I don't know the area. I'd love to go out. I want to find a nice dinner spot that has an average meal between $30 and $40, and it's in this genre, and I'm staying at this hotel. I want to find the highest rated restaurants. Can you make me a reservation at 7 p.m. on Thursday?"
Yeah.
And it will be able to do that. So I think that is the part that you'll see a lot more evolution coming out soon. And remember, we are looking at this innovation velocity right now, Dan. I say it's in dog years.
Yeah.
There's 7 leapfrogs within the same year, and that is the truth, right? Everything's just happening so quickly. So you're going to start to see some amazing things. I was at a Silicon Valley conference recently, and they predicted that by 2025 or 2026, we will see a commercially successful major motion picture film produced completely in AI.
Mm.
Everything from scripting to the audio to the voices to the video to the deep fake people, the special effects, everything will be done electronically. No actors, no people.
Wow. And that'll be like the first Toy Story, which
Yes.
changed everything.
Yes.
And now let's take a brief pause to hear a word from our sponsor. Safer Sanctuaries. Nurturing trust within faith communities is a new and comprehensive resource that continues the tradition of Safe Sanctuaries ministry by building on the trusted policies and procedures that have guided churches over the past 25 years. This resource contains theological grounding for the work of abuse prevention, psychological insights about abuse and abuse prevention, basic guidelines for risk reduction, age-level specific guidance, and step-by-step instructions on how to develop, revise, update, and implement an abuse prevention plan in your church or organization. For Christians, resisting evil and doing justice are ways that we live and serve Jesus Christ. Safer Sanctuaries provides help to do just that by framing this work as a life-giving, community-enhancing, and proactive endeavor. It enables communities to be empowered and flourish as they develop and implement policies and procedures that make everyone safer. To learn more, go to safersanctuaries.org or call 800-972-0433. And now, back to our program.
Well, let me ask you this. This isn't on the script, and so if you want to cut it out, we can cut it out. But I had a colleague the other day said he felt like he could already sense a unifying or sort of dumbing down of the tone of things, and he felt like he could tell what was produced by AI. And so in a world where AI is creating more content and then it's trained off itself, does it just become a feedback loop where we all sound like each other? Is that something to be concerned about?
Um, not for the short term, at least. I don't think.
Gotcha.
I think these models are increasing in their dynamic nature rapidly still. If you are using ChatGPT, the free version as of today is using, I think, GPT 3 or 3.5. And the paid version is the fourth generation of
Right.
GPT. And the fourth generation is, not just a small upgrade. It isn't like an iPhone where they make excuses for you to buy one every year.
Yeah.
But the fourth generation versus the third generation is a huge leap, and I think you will see continued growth in these models as they start to evolve, and more importantly, because there's competition in the market with the different AI technologies and engines, you're going to see completely different what do you call it, like the different personalities of
Yeah. Yeah.
AI. You already start to see it. Bing.com, which has integrated GPT, is quite different than ChatGPT, which
Mhm.
is using technically the same underlying large language model. And it's very different from Claude, which is the Google version that Anthropic has produced. It's a competing AI system. Google dropped about, I think, like $350 million or $400 million in investment in this AI arms race against
Yeah.
Microsoft and OpenAI. So you're going to start to see all these other AI models evolve, and they're all going to be a little bit different.
Well, we've teased it before, but one of the keys to producing something of value is in prompt writing, and that is, what questions do you ask, what parameters do you give the AI? Things like, imagine you are a United Methodist pastor speaking to a church in this city or speaking to this age bracket. you know with specificity is obviously key. What are just some top line tips for prompt writing? Obviously, I encourage everyone again to go find the Facebook group, and you can see tons of examples of
Yeah.
prompts and what people are learning about. But if someone is like inspired, they're driving, they want to sign up and play around with it right when they get off the road. What are some tips for prompt writing?
Yeah, so I think everyone gets on this evolutionary path when you first start using it. It's you start doing one sentence prompts, right? You're just asking a quick question. And again, it's like that seminary intern. How are they supposed to know what you really want if you're just telling them, "Oh, go write me a social media post about Mother's Day,"
Yeah.
right? You need to structure what you ask to be a little bit more complex or sophisticated. That gives the AI, your conversation partner, a little bit more context and clues. And so I've come up with a framework that helps get to better answers faster, and faster is the acronym. So FASTER. There's 6 parts of a prompt that if you just think through in your mind, to cover those bases, it typically gives you a pretty good first response. So F is for form factor. So tell it, what do you want? Is it a bullet point list, an outline, a poem? Is it a devotional? Right. So what is the form factor of the content? The second one is audience definition. Who is it intended for? So is it intended for the youth group? Is it intended for strangers in your community? Is it intended for people attending Sunday worship? Is it for your staff or volunteers? Right? Who's your audience for the piece of content that you're producing? The S, FAS, the S is for subject matter expert, and that's what you alluded to, where you're telling the AI, go into your deep database of knowledge and the pattern recognition that you have the ability to do and mimic something. So it's giving it a much better clue as to what type of information it's looking for, what voice. And so the subject matter expert is typically saying, act as this, act like a seminary professor who is an Old Testament scholar, right? Act like a church marketing expert, right? So that you're trying to define for the AI, what niche expertise that AI is supposed to use in terms of producing content. FAST. T is for task. Task is literally going through and telling it all the details that you want around the project. So if it's a bullet point list that you said early on as the form factor, you want to give it a little bit more details. So I want 10 or more bullet points. They need to have 2 or 3 sentences each. They have to end with a question, right? So you can give it all the task details that you want. The E in faster is for examples and evidence. And this is where, you were talking about using AI to generate the intro to this podcast, Dan.
Yeah.
One thing that you could have done, and it is helpful, is you could copy paste in examples of not just your own previous intros, different types of intros, so it tries to understand your voice. It could also, you could take other popular podcasts that you love and help it mimic, or give it evidence of what you want. So saying, hey, I want it to be first person. For example, write sentences like this and not that, right? And so examples and evidence is the E. And the last one in faster is R. So what are the restriction and guardrails that you are giving it? Again, think of your seminary intern and saying, hey, theologically, we don't write for people who love cats. Our theology is about dogs and not cats, right? Or we love peanut butter, not jelly, right? So there's restrictions of all sorts that you can actually give guidance for to that seminary intern when they go off and do the project. What are those things? What would be helpful to give that so that you don't need to deal with it in a revision? So FASTER, form factor, audience, what's the subject matter expertise, task details, examples and evidence, and then the restrictions that you want for the project. So that typically is hey, if you go through that checklist and just write some stuff down, you don't need to be eloquent. Again, the seminary intern is very forgiving and very polite and works extra hard to please you. These could be bullet points, they could be fragments, but just going through that checklist usually helps you get a better return on what comes back.
That's gold, Kenny. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so generous. I usually hit some of those, but I'm going to start playing with that. A while back, I have a 5-year-old, and we listen to the Chompers podcast, which is a 2-minute podcast that comes out twice a day, and it's meant to accompany toothbrushing. And so you listen to it, and it prompts your child to switch to different parts of the mouth and keeps them entertained while they're brushing. And I said to ChatGPT, I want a daily podcast for parents of 3 to 5-year-olds to play in the car with their kids on the way to drop off. And then I gave it, United Methodist, formed around different topics like that. And it immediately gave me 10 different show ideas. Now, were some of them similar? Sure. But there were probably at least 5 unique categories of potential shows. And I said, give me an example episode title for each one. And then I picked the one I like. So give me an example intro of one. And within 3 minutes, I had what probably would have taken me 3 hours to come up with. And those prompts, the better you get at writing them, the better. Now, we focus mostly on language, but of course, image, video, audio tools are out there as well. One of the ones that's impressed me the most is the Adobe Podcast Enhance speech tools. You can record yourself using the voice memo function on your phone in a noisy coffee shop, upload it, and it comes back sounding like you're on a professional microphone in a studio. And I know that there are tools that want to eventually turn audio editing, like podcast editing, into just editing the transcript, and it will do all the cuts for you. And those things are all coming. But even just the sheer amount of graphics that you have to create in the church, from sermon series art to social media to signage, man, it can feel like a lot at times when it's really just creating variations of the same thing or variations on a theme. What are some tools that are out there that are accessible and not that expensive for folks who maybe want to dive in and try some of the more image-based tools?
Yeah, the stuff that's happening is wild, right? The examples that you see people posting in the Facebook group
Yeah.
is crazy. Rob, one of the guys that are part of the community, he's created an Instagram account that is all about silly cats in silly hats, and they're really funny. And every day there's a different cat that's AI generated with a silly hat that's AI generated. Um, in terms of tools and accessibility, I would say Canva is something that I love suggesting to church teams, especially smaller ones.
Yeah.
They have a free version, they have a paid version. Canva itself has both a text-based AI tool as well as an image generation AI tool in there, as well as a cool presentation AI tool as well. So that's one. Another one is Microsoft. Microsoft is back with ChatGPT and Bing, and it's Revenge of the Nerds, right? And so they've come out with an application called Designer, Microsoft Designer, that has an AI function in it. It's not super robust, but it's going to obviously get better over time, and you're going to see all of these things get integrated into Microsoft Office and the whole suite of tools that they offer. So those are two, specific places. There are definitely other tools out there. Our friend Dustin in the community has built his own tool called Magi.co,
Yeah.
which is both text and image. And he's created some specific functions. It's the typical background removal tool,
Yes.
but he has a background replacement tool. You could literally ask it to replace it with something. And then there's the traditional text to image generator as well. So there's plenty of tools out there. ChatGPT's company OpenAI has a tool called Dolly, which is pretty accessible. There is some cost after the initial trial account, but it's pretty cheap. And then the one that's everyone is loving right now is called Midjourney.
Yeah.
But Midjourney is a little bit nerdy. There's no actual website for it. You actually have to use Discord. Discord's a little bit like Slack. And if you're not on it, it could be a little bit bewildering. So I would start with Canva and then explore from there all the other places you might go.
Absolutely. And again, if you have an Adobe subscription, they are slowly introducing, I think they're calling it Firefly, and
Yes.
they're introducing some. I definitely need to get better at image generating prompts because I was just like, I was simultaneously blown away and also confused as to why I was getting what I was getting. But all right, Kenny, one last devil's advocate type question, and then we'll close on a high note. Obviously, tools can be used for good. They can also be misused. There's already concerns about deep fakes, whether they're images or audio or video. Some of the pushback in the artistic community, some of it certainly may be get off our lawn type of response, but some of it is also, hey, I feel like these tools are ripping off my style.
Yeah.
They've been trained on my art. I didn't give them permission to do that. And then, for me as a writer and a public speaker, I worry about plagiarism. How do I know that what ChatGPT is giving me is an original formulation or original enough? Or even beyond that, like, do I need to be citing AI tools in sermons and writings? If I'm quoting another pastor, I'll say, as Pastor so-and-so said, would it be helpful to a congregation to say, hey, I was having a chat with AI this week, and here's what it told me. What guardrails might you offer specifically to people in ministry to use these tools responsibly?
Those are all great questions, and there's no right answer yet. And this is one of those things why, for ministry leaders in particular, for our niche or vertical or industry, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
for our community of church leaders, this is why we need to be in conversation with each other. This is why you addressing this on your podcast is so critical, because it is all evolving so quickly and there are no standards. So attribution, don't know. I don't know what the best policy is, because it is not just like quoting someone else's sermon. It is more akin to Google. So do you give attribution that you actually
Yeah.
Googled for your sermon and research stuff, or used multiple commentaries? Do you actually have a bibliography for every sermon? Typically sermons don't come along with that.
Right.
I think it's more of, are you hiding the fact that you're using AI? Like, and again, it's I would say It's what type of posture you have to this technology. You don't
Yes.
want to keep it in the dark, right? Bringing everything to light is better. And I think the easiest place to start, again, is conversations. So, can you have a conversation this week at a staff meeting or a team meeting and discuss it? Just learn what everybody else is doing with it. You will see most communities, probably from what, at least from what I've seen in churches, 55% of the people in any given room have not used any AI tool yet, ever. And a bunch of them are curious about it, have heard of it. There's going to be definitely a big double-digit percentage that have never heard of AI, or haven't, literally it's not on their radar.
Yeah.
But you have people that will surprise you. Every single time I've been in a room, we've asked, the leader gets surprised at who actually is using AI a lot. And that opens up the conversation to, okay, what are you using it for? Why? What's the benefit? What's the drawbacks? And just having that conversation and being open with it, I think allows you to not be caught off guard, or not let your people be caught off guard if it ever comes to light that you are using AI in the process. So that would be the first generic overarching thing. The other thing I do say is that all organizations today need an AI policy.
Mm.
You need to think very quickly, and whether you embrace it or not, it is accessible to everybody. You need to have a position as to what is appropriate, what is ethical, moral, and even from a privacy standpoint, just to be safe from a liability standpoint, right?
Yes.
Because to keep your church safe from liabilities, I think you need to have some explicit conversations with what is proper use of AI, because a lot of these tools um, take what you put into it, and it's a learning model, right? And so they'll take it, put it into thing, and they want to improve the AI from it. So your content, whatever it is that you're putting in a sensitive pastoral care issue, and you're trying to ask ChatGPT how to respond to John Smith, who just had an affair or had a mental breakdown at work, or right, something
Yeah.
that's sensitive. You don't know where that's going to end up.
Right.
Right? We just don't know. They have the right to. I don't think the intent is to expose it, but you just never know with data. As we're evolving with the social media experience as a society and culture, we just don't know where the data is going to go. So, having an AI policy is something that everyone really needs to think about and publish pretty soon in 2023. It needs to be a living document. It's going
Yeah.
to change and have revisions. And the only way to produce one is to just be exposed to it. You don't need
Yeah.
to be a fan of it. You don't need to be an advocate, but you should be exposed to what AI actually can do.
All right, let's finish on the optimistic side of things.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for AI, specifically when it comes to enhancing or even enabling ministry?
I think humans, or humanity, is something um, that cannot be replicated by AI, right? AI
Yeah.
has to be subordinate to us at the end of the day. And so I do think what it is good for are lower value tasks in general. And so the opportunity is, can it take a lot of the mundane stuff that you do in your ministry work so that it frees up time, energy, headspace, focus, you're right? So that you can actually use your time in the highest value use cases possible in your church, in your ministry.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to accelerate, and I think it's literally also going to impact budgets and the need for staff and headcounts in many areas. Again, opening up budget and bandwidth so that you can actually do more with less. And I think every church would love to do that. Do more
Yes.
with less.
And just as a personal thing, oftentimes when giant leaps in productivity come along, we say that this is so we can take more time off or be more human, and we just end up cramming more things in.
Yes, yes.
And so, just the pastoral side of me, both as someone who cares about our audience and someone who is very much struggling with doing this myself. Some of the time you free up, it is a positive thing to pour back into yourself and your health and your family, because they affect your ministry too. But
Absolutely.
that's a whole nother episode, which we actually, I think, touched on last year. But Kenny, thank you so much for coming back, Mr. Three-Timer. We appreciate you. If folks want to connect with you or remind us again of the URL for the Facebook group and that event you have coming up in June.
Yeah, I'm easy to find. If you Google me, Kenny Jahng, on all the major platforms. And if you want to check out the group, it's aiforchurchleaders.com. And we are actually pumping out a lot of content. A lot of it is AI assisted on churchtechtoday.com. And so I'd love to get your feedback. What are you learning? And what are the things that you want to learn about? So that all that stuff is in the Facebook group as well, aiforchurchleaders.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kenny. We appreciate you, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
And now, listeners, we want to hear from you. Have you tried any of these new AI tools? And if so, how did it go? How do you envision these tools being able to help you in your ministry? Email us at podcast@umcom.org, and we just might share your thoughts or stories on a future episode. And you can, of course, use that email, podcast@umcom.org, to send us any feedback or topic suggestions you have for the show. We always love hearing from you. And as always, the easiest way to support the show and help other church communicators like yourself find it is by sharing this episode with your friends and colleagues, and by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to us right now. And did you know that United Methodist Communications has celebrated over 80 years of ministry? Your support ensures that the latest denominational news, dynamic stories, and informative articles will continue to connect our global community. You can make a tax-deductible donation today at resourceumc.org/giveumcom. Thanks again for listening to the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast.
Safer Sanctuaries, Nurturing Trust Within Faith Communities, is a new and comprehensive resource that continues the tradition of Safe Sanctuaries ministry by building on its trusted policies and procedures. This resource contains theological grounding for the work of abuse prevention, basic guidelines for risk reduction, age-level specific guidance, and step-by-step instructions on how to develop, revise, update, and implement an abuse prevention plan.